Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. This time we're going to be taking a look at a topic that's been blowing up lately, deepfakes and information disorder.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been evolving rapidly.
And you know what's interesting is the source you gave us goes deep into
It
this,
really does.
especially how this is impacting the world and what it means for us here in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So we're going to be covering all of that. We'll be exploring how these deepfakes are actually made, looking at some, real world examples that have already happened, and then what are the very real dangers, the dangers they pose, not just to, one person or to small groups of people, but also to entire societies and, honestly, even to global stability.
I mean, it started out as almost a joke.
Right.
Just kind of a silly internet meme kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But now it's shaking the very foundations of truth and trust in our digital world.
Yeah, and when you start thinking about things like elections or even warfare,
Absolutely.
the implications are huge.
Yeah.
So the document you provided, it kind of breaks this whole information disorder thing down into three main categories: disinformation, misinformation, and then malinformation.
Right.
And the document is very specific about those. Why do we think it's so important to know the difference between those three?
Well, each one presents a very different type of challenge, right?
Yeah.
So disinformation, that's when you're intentionally putting out false information to try to deceive.
Yeah, like almost with the intent to cause some type of harm.
Exactly. Like you think about a video that somebody fabricated, like of a political leader,
Okay.
saying something super inflammatory, to try to sway voters against them or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's classic disinformation.
Okay.
Then you've got misinformation. That's when somebody shares something false, but they don't know it's false.
Gotcha.
Maybe they forward on a news article that was actually satire,
Right.
and they just didn't realize it.
And nowadays you see a lot of that happening on social media.
Yeah.
So that's pretty dangerous too, because sometimes you can't tell what's real and what's satire.
Exactly, yeah. And then you have malinformation. Now, this one uses genuine information, but twists it around to try to cause some kind of harm.
So it's kind of like taking something out of context
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
just to make it, to fit your agenda or whatever.
Exactly. So it's all about using information in a manipulative way.
Okay, so we've got these three flavors of digital trickery, so to speak, and the source you provided, it really paints a kind of stark picture of how all of this is playing out globally.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the most impactful examples that we saw there?
Well, the 2020 U.S. presidential election comes to mind right away.
Yeah.
I mean, that one really showed how deep fakes and these disinformation campaigns can even affect well-established democracies.
Yeah. I mean, that was something that before that election, I don't think a lot of people thought that was even possible.
Right.
To manipulate, a democratic election like that.
Right. But the thing is, it's not just the U.S.,
Right.
This document talks about unrest that's happening in Europe,
Okay.
fueled by very similar tactics, political manipulation in India, even like inciting ethnic tensions in places like Myanmar and Ethiopia.
It's pretty scary because it makes you think, well, if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely something to be concerned about. And, the source, it brings it back home.
Yeah.
Connects all these global events to what's happening in Pakistan.
Absolutely.
And this is where I think it gets really interesting for our listeners, because we talk a lot about these things happening in other countries. But what is it that makes Pakistan particularly vulnerable to all these trends?
Pakistan's got this unique combination of factors,
Okay.
You've got deep-rooted, complex sociopolitical issues.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got this rapid spread of digital technology.
Yeah, especially among the younger generation.
Exactly. And then, unfortunately, limited digital literacy among a lot of the population.
Mm-hmm. So basically, people are just not equipped.
Right.
They're not equipped to be able to discern what's true and what's not.
Yeah, it creates this perfect storm, Deepfakes and disinformation can really flourish in that kind of environment.
And that's something that the source talks about, right?
It does, yeah.
It gives some pretty specific examples of how this is playing out in Pakistan, and some of them are kind of chilling,
Yeah.
They talk about deepfakes being used to target public figures,
Right.
activists, even journalists.
Mhm.
And, it goes into how these disinformation campaigns amplify tensions that are already there.
Yeah, especially those sectarian tensions.
Yeah.
It's really concerning,
It is, and it kind of leads to this hypothetical scenario that the source presents.
Uh-huh.
Imagine a deepfake video surfaces, right?
Sure.
Showing a citizen of one country doing something that is considered deeply blasphemous.
Yeah. I remember that.
in Pakistan.
Yeah.
What do you think happens?
Well, I think about that, and it's just a truly concerning scenario
Right.
because you can see how people could weaponize something like that
Yeah,
to try to manipulate emotions and incite violence.
exactly. So, I mean, what kind of fallout do we think could happen from something like that?
Oh, man, the potential fallout is enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just about potential unrest and violence within Pakistan itself.
Right.
It's about how this could escalate internationally,
Right.
diplomatic crises, maybe even regional instability. It's like this terrifying domino effect.
It is, and it really makes you think, like, how fragile things are.
Absolutely.
And all it takes is one spark to really set things off.
It's true.
And this all kind of points to a bigger issue that the source keeps highlighting, this
Okay.
erosion of trust, right?
Yeah.
So how are deepfakes changing the way that we view truth?
I think the biggest thing is we're living in a world now where that old saying, seeing is believing,
Right.
doesn't really hold true anymore.
And that has huge implications. Think about it.
Yeah.
Our faith in traditional media,
Hmm.
our confidence in institutions, even the foundations of democratic processes,
Right.
all those things are built on trust. And deepfakes, they're just tearing that apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the document even talks about the World Economic Forum and how they did this assessment. And they said that misinformation is the most severe global risk in the short term
Yeah.
and a significant long-term threat.
Wow.
And it makes you think, like, what makes this such a major risk?
They're not exaggerating, you
No.
know? I mean, misinformation can destabilize entire governments.
Right.
It can erode public trust in the institutions that we need to function as a society.
Mm.
It can even incite violence on a massive scale. The danger is just like total chaos
Yeah.
when people can't even agree on what's true anymore.
Yeah, because if you don't have a shared reality,
Exactly.
then how do you even begin to solve problems?
You can't, right? How do
Yeah.
you address climate change?
How do you deal with a pandemic?
Or any other global issue that requires everyone to kind of be on the same page.
Exactly. It becomes impossible if a big chunk of the population is just being completely manipulated.
Yeah. So it sounds like we've got a pretty big problem on our hands. So
Yeah.
what can we do? Is there any hope of, pushing back against this wave of, digital deception?
There is hope.
Okay.
A lot of it's going to hinge on innovation and proactive measures.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that after the break.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute.
Yeah, a lot of it hinges on innovation and proactive measures.
Okay. So where do we even begin to push back?
Media literacy.
Okay.
It's absolutely crucial. We need to empower individuals
Yeah.
to be discerning consumers of information.
Okay.
Think of it like we're building a BS detector for the digital age.
I love that. I love that analogy. But how do you actually teach people to be more discerning online? It's not like they teach Spot the Deepfake 101 in schools.
True. But there are some encouraging initiatives emerging.
Okay.
Finland, for example.
Yeah.
They've actually integrated media literacy directly into their education system
Wow.
with really positive results. Imagine if Pakistan could implement something similar.
Yeah.
Teaching these critical thinking and digital literacy skills from a young age.
That would be a game changer.
It would.
But what about the adults who are already navigating this sea of information?
Right.
How do we help them develop those essential skills?
Public awareness campaigns.
Okay.
Really key. And there are some fantastic organizations out there doing amazing work.
Okay.
Creating engaging content.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking down these complex concepts.
Yeah.
And giving people practical tips. Like how to spot misinformation.
Yeah.
Think about like fact-checking websites,
Okay.
explainer videos, maybe even interactive games.
Okay.
Anything that makes learning about this stuff fun and accessible.
So it's kind of like meeting people where they are.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay, so media literacy is a critical piece of the puzzle.
it is.
But what about the tech side of things? Can AI actually be a weapon against deepfakes, or is that still science fiction?
It's definitely not science fiction.
Okay.
AI plays a huge role both in creating and combating deepfakes.
Okay.
On the detection side,
Yeah.
researchers are developing algorithms that can analyze these videos
Yeah.
for those subtle inconsistencies.
Gotcha.
Things like unnatural blinking patterns
Okay.
or discrepancies in the lighting
Gotcha.
that might indicate that the video is a fake.
So like tiny details
Tiny details, yeah,
that a
exactly.
human might not even pick up on.
Right.
Okay.
For instance, Microsoft has a tool called Video Authenticator,
Okay.
and it can analyze a video and look for these subtle cues,
Mm-hmm.
like that unnatural blinking or the inconsistent lighting.
Okay.
And then there are even programs that can analyze the audio track of a video.
Wow.
Look for vocal patterns that don't match the speaker's known voice.
It's like they're thinking of everything.
They are, yeah.
But I mean, it seems like this would have to be a constant cat and mouse game
Oh, it is.
where the people creating the deepfakes are always trying to stay one step ahead.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing arms race.
Right.
Both sides pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So is it even possible to stay ahead of that?
Well, that's why a multi-layered approach is so important.
Okay.
We need to combine those technological solutions
Mm-hmm.
with the media literacy education that we were talking about.
Right.
And robust legal frameworks.
Right. And speaking of legal frameworks, I want to circle back to something that you had mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act.
PECA.
PECA, yeah.
Mhm.
And the National Cyber Regulatory Authority
The NCRA.
in Pakistan.
Mhm.
You know, you had mentioned that there are concerns about the potential for these regulations to be misused.
Mm.
Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest concerns with PECA is the potential for censorship.
Okay.
A lot of critics argue that the language that's used in the act is overly broad
Okay.
and that it could be used to silence dissenting voices or stifle legitimate criticism.
So basically, it could be used to shut down anyone who disagrees with the government.
Yeah, potentially.
And then what about privacy?
Yeah, privacy is a huge concern.
Okay.
I mean, the NCRA has these very extensive powers
Mm-hmm.
to monitor online activity.
Okay.
And that raises concerns about mass surveillance
Okay.
and also about what's called the chilling effect on free speech.
So basically, people are going to be afraid to speak their minds.
Exactly. If they think they're constantly being watched.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seems like finding that balance
It's tough.
between protecting citizens from harm and upholding their fundamental rights.
It's really delicate.
Super delicate. So how do we find that sweet spot? What needs to happen to make sure these regulations are being used responsibly?
I think transparency and accountability
Okay.
are key. We need clear oversight of the NCRA's activities
Okay.
with safeguards in place to prevent the abuse of power.
Right, because we don't want to just give them free rein to do whatever they want.
Exactly. And
Ugh.
any restrictions on speech need to be really clearly defined
Mm-hmm.
and narrowly tailored.
Okay.
So we're talking about addressing genuine threats,
Right.
not just silencing opposing viewpoints.
And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before.
It does, yeah.
With, being able to determine what's true and what's not.
Absolutely.
And I mean, who decides what's a genuine threat?
That's a really important question,
Right.
and one that's being raised by a lot of critics of PECA.
So, I mean, who should be making those decisions?
Ideally, you want individuals with deep expertise
Okay.
in technology, in law, in human rights, in ethics.
So not just like random bureaucrats.
Right, exactly. These need to be people who really understand the complexities
Yeah.
and the potential consequences.
Because the stakes are pretty high.
They are. I mean, without that expertise, even well-intentioned policies can backfire.
Right.
You know?
And cause more harm than good.
Exactly.
So it seems like as we, kind of go further down this rabbit hole,
Yeah,
that, technology is just one piece of the solution.
it is.
We need to foster this culture of critical thinking.
All right.
Empower individuals to become those savvy consumers of information
Mm,
and ensure that regulations are implemented with transparency
yeah,
and a deep respect for those fundamental rights.
precisely. It's a complex web of challenges.
It is.
But, it's encouraging to see so many bright minds out there working on innovative solutions.
Yeah, there's definitely hope.
There is.
So I guess the key for all of us is to just stay informed,
Absolutely.
stay engaged, and stay hopeful
I like that.
that we can build a more trustworthy and resilient digital future together. All right, well, we'll be back after a quick break to explore even more proactive steps you can take
Okay, sounds good.
to fight back against deepfakes and disinformation. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay empowered.
Welcome back to our deep dive on deepfakes and information disorder. We've covered a lot of ground already, but now I want to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
We've talked about the problems, the impacts, the different types of information disorder,
Great.
but now I want to focus on action.
Okay.
What can we as individuals actually do to push back
Yeah.
against this wave of digital deception? it's easy to feel kind of powerless, when you look at the scale of the problem.
Absolutely. But I think there's real power, real strength in collective action.
Okay.
We're not just these passive consumers of information.
Right.
We're citizens, we're voters, we're members of communities, and that gives us leverage.
I like that. So give me some examples. What kind of actions can we take that can actually make a difference?
Well, let's start with voting.
In a democracy, our votes are our voices,
Yeah.
and we need to use them wisely.
So be informed voters, basically.
Exactly. Research the candidates.
Yeah.
Look at their platforms, their track records. Don't just rely on social media or what's in the headlines.
Right.
Dig a little deeper. Consult reputable news sources.
Okay.
Look for evidence-based policies.
So base our choices on facts, not, hype or emotional appeals.
Exactly.
Oh.
Support organizations that are doing good work in this space.
Okay.
There are so many amazing NGOs out there, think tanks, advocacy groups,
Yeah.
working tirelessly to combat misinformation, promote media literacy, hold tech companies accountable. You can donate to them. You can volunteer your time or even just spread the word about their work.
So kind of put your money where your mouth is, right?
Yeah, align your actions with your values.
I like that.
What about engaging directly with our elected officials?
Yeah.
Can we push for stronger policies,
Yeah.
stronger regulations to address this?
Yeah. So get out there, contact our representatives, write letters.
Exactly. Participate in town hall meetings.
Yeah.
Make your voice heard.
Demand transparency in government.
Absolutely. Advocate for stronger data protection laws.
Okay.
Push for ethical guidelines for using AI.
So basically, let them know that we're paying attention.
Exactly.
We expect them to take this seriously.
Yeah.
But what about on a personal level?
Yeah.
Are there things we can do, just in our own circles, our own daily lives that can help combat this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it starts with being mindful of what you're sharing online. Before you hit that forward button, just pause for a second.
Okay.
Ask yourself a few questions. Is this information accurate? Is it coming from a reliable source? Could sharing this actually be harmful or misleading?
So don't be a part of the problem, basically.
Exactly.
But what if you see somebody in your network sharing something that is just completely false? What's the best way to approach that conversation? Because those can be kind of tricky.
They can be really tricky. I think the key is to approach it with empathy and respect.
Okay.
Remember, most people aren't intentionally spreading misinformation.
Right.
A lot of times they're victims of it themselves.
So don't shame them. Don't attack them.
Exactly. Instead of doing that, try gently correcting the record.
Okay.
Share a fact-check article maybe. Offer it a different perspective.
Gotcha.
Or just ask open-ended questions that encourage them to think critically.
So kind of plant that seed.
Yeah, it is.
Have those difficult conversations, but do it in a way that's constructive and respectful.
Yeah, exactly. Not shutting down dialogue, not fueling division.
Right.
It's a valuable skill.
Yeah, it is.
Both online and offline.
And it's okay to disagree.
It is.
Yeah.
Not every conversation is going to change somebody's mind.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But, by engaging in that respectful dialogue, at least we can plant those seeds of doubt.
Right.
Encourage people to be more critical of the information they're encountering.
So, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm kind of left feeling this sense of urgency, but also, I think, empowerment.
Okay.
The threat is real, but we're not powerless against it.
Absolutely not.
We have the tools, we have the resources, and most importantly, we have each other. What's the most important message you want to leave our listener with today?
The battle for truth. It's ongoing. It demands vigilance, critical thinking, a willingness to engage. And by working together, I really believe we can create a more informed, more resilient, more truth-driven world.
So to our listener, we leave you with this thought. Don't be a passive bystander in this digital age. Be curious, be skeptical, be engaged, be a force for truth.
And keep diving deeper. There's always more to learn, more to uncover, more ways to make a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered.